Hi, and welcome to Gay Out the City. I'm your host, Prince Electro Diamond, and today I'm going to have to do something that sometimes happens in entertainment sort of podcast shows and radio shows. I'm going to have to do the show Sunday as I had planned because I already gotten this fabulous look without the guest. So, as those of you who follow me on social media might have seen, I promoted that today was supposed to be a interview with Mateo Escobar, who is currently on the show For the Love of Dilfs on Out TV. And I answered all of Mateo's questions before we were supposed to talk. I reached out to Mateo this morning and he never got back to me. So I cannot tell you what the fuck happened. I did what I did the same way with Benji Bradshaw last week. I reached out to him. I told him when I talked to him last that I was going to send him the link to this stream now. And this morning came. I reached out to him as I was doing my makeup and getting ready. He never got back to me. So I basically just said, fuck it. I'm already dressed. I'm going to do the podcast anyway. So in this podcast, I'll kind of just tell you what it's like. Because as I said before, I love the dynamic of changing Gay Out the City. I love going towards a more interview-centric podcast. But the one thing that I will say about that is you're very much at the mercy of the guest. All you can do is reach out. I had to actually, in truth, I'll be honest, it's my fucking podcast. Mateo was actually a replacement because I had somebody. I reached out to them on Wednesday, as I do with all of my guests. Thus forward, I reach out to them the Wednesday before to confirm that they can do the podcast on Sunday. And I'm not going to say their name. I should. But that motherfucker tried to get money out of me. Now listen. If this podcast generated money, I'd have no problem giving people money. I think it's a little ridiculous, but I might consider it. Because it's like, you're going to ask me for $50, $100, $1,000. I do everything myself. As anyone who's been a fan of this podcast since season 1, or has seen most of this season, there is no team. I do everything. I do the research. I come up with the questions that I'm asking people. I don't have a producer to hand off this shit to. So, what people have to understand is that I'm reaching out to these people because I'm genuinely a fan of these people's work. And for me, it's very satisfying getting to know people because that's all I want to do. As I said in episode 8, I told my story. unless something like dramatic happens in my life, I've told what I have to say. There isn't anything life changing yet. So, in truth, I just want to tell other people's stories. I want to get to know people. That last week when I met Benji Bradshaw, I had never felt closer to somebody. And it's very hard for me to open up to people, but with Benji, it felt so easy. And it was great. I'd followed Benji for like something like 6-7 years. That was the first time we met. And even we talked in the interview before, or no, we talked before the interview and we talked a little bit after the interview. And it was honestly great to like get to know somebody on that level. And that's all I want to do. Like, I love doing this. And I want to meet new people. Because I will say this, and the reason why I wanted to change this to an interview-based podcast instead of just being me behind a microphone is because, yeah, anyone who's watched this, you've all seen this. I can get behind a microphone and talk for half an hour. But with other people, you can feed off their energy. And there is nothing more freeing than that. Just freeing getting to know people. And sometimes you'll find out in getting to like do this podcast. Now, I don't want to like prejudge somebody, but I will say when you like schedule somebody into a podcast and they don't show up, again, I don't know Mateo. This is my chance to get to know Mateo, but it's kind of an asshole move to like say you're free at a time, literally set things up, answer somebody's questions about how the interview is going to be conducted and how like they're going to get onto the podcast, because I did answer that question of how we were going to do it, if we were going to do it over Zoom or whatever. I answered that question for Mateo, and to not show up, and not only that, if you can't do this podcast when I need you to, hey, I'm all about being flexible. I'll work with people's schedules. I actually have to get back to somebody and kind of like give them another decision about doing an interview. Because, as I said, I'm going to repeat this, but I'm doing this shit myself. And I'm trying to reach up. Meaning I'm trying to get stars. I'm trying to get people who are big currently or formerly in the LGBTQ community. So basically, I'm sitting here as someone with fans that I'm grateful for, but I'm basically nobody. And I'm sitting here trying to like claw my way up and ask them, hey, do you want to do this? Because I'd love to get to know you. And that's what I want to do. I want to expose my followers and my fans to people that they might not even know about. And this is twofold because it's like, let's just take Benji for example. My fans and friends got to know Benji, and Benji's fans and friends got to know me. Someone who we had mutually known each other, but our fans didn't know each other. So that's all this is. And truly, I still love doing this, and I'm going to keep doing it. I will say so far, I have a guest kind of secured. I will say till that Wednesday before, I don't think anybody's locked in. Because, as only I can explain, shit happens. Shit happens. They're not going to do what I want them to do. And my whole point is, you're going to turn down essentially free press where you give me plugs, I'll plug whatever you want. And that's, in truth, that's the model of my sort of like interviewing hero, who is Howard Stern. Howard Stern doesn't fucking pay people to be on his show. He pays them in plugs. And that's how it should be. It's like, you give me what you want me to like plug. I'll say it on my show. You get a chance to like put it on my show and let people who are your fans, are my fans, let them know if they're in an area. If you're in an area that they're going to be, they can fucking come see you and meet you as well. They can meet you in person. Because shit, I'll admit, I'd rather fucking be doing these interviews in person. Doing them over Twitch is good, but it sucks. I'd love to be, because I'm the kind of person who, where when we're done with the interview, I'd love to just like give you a hug and like embrace you, because that's who the fuck I am. And granted, the pandemic allowed me to do this shit kind of virtually, as everyone's podcast became and everyone's radio shows became. But there is nothing more. Well, I'm not going to say there is nothing better. Here we go. Better than being able to sit across from a person and get their energy when you're talking to them. So, as I will say, is this going to happen in the future where I'm going to have to cancel a podcast the day of? In truth, I don't know. I can't know. Because all I can do is reach out and try and get people to their interview. Because as I said, you can't see it because it's off camera. Because much like with the opinionated bitch, I like to keep stuff off camera. I don't want you to think that like I have to read stuff off a prompter, but let's get real. With the opinionated bitch, I don't know everything. I try and consume as much as I can, and from that, that's how I grow. I just want to learn shit, but I do the work. I do the research. This is just a message. Maybe some people who are going to be interviewed on my podcast can see this. I'm asking for the bare minimum, which is to respond to me, show up, and give me an hour. Which it's not a lot. I've seen some of what people like Joe Rogan do. Joe Rogan sometimes does a 2.5 hour interview. That seems like forever. And there are some people that I could go 2 hours with. Hell, as soon as I can, I'm going to fucking have Benji back on this podcast again. Because after we got done, I already thought of more questions to ask Benji in days after our interview so that I could do a part 2. And I will say this. So far, at least, from what I can see, that's someone I can depend on. Who will show up, promote the interview that they're doing, and honestly, just come through. And I will say this. I always try and keep calm on Gay Out the City. And be a little bit more like, whoo! But I will say I am a little upset. Which I mean, I feel is natural. Like, you ask somebody to show up and they kind of just bail on you. It's not. I don't know. It feels a little like weird. And I don't know if I'm like scorned to the point where I would never have Mateo on again. I mean, I've done the research, so like I potentially could. But I got to think about it because I am someone who will give like a person the benefit of the doubt. If they're sick or something else like that, I mean, that's understandable. You can't help being sick. If you got sick the day of, it's just like, let me fucking know. I'll figure something out. I would rather, oops, my bad. I would rather know that you're sick or know that you like overslept or something so that at least I could kind of plan out something in other terms, because I just looked to figure out if like something happened. No word. And this is like lesson learned for me, where it's maybe I shouldn't have a fill-in guest. Or maybe I should. Maybe I should just like, I don't know. I'm still new at this. Like, especially the interview part of doing Gay Out the City. This is very new to me. Because, again, if those of you who've been fans of this podcast know, in season 1, I did one interview, and that was my best friend, Sean. And that's because we didn't have to be on camera, and we did it at his house, his apartment. And I showed up, set everything up, and we just went off and started talking about how we knew each other. And by the way, if you want to hear that interview, you can't see it because it's not on YouTube, but it is on my Spotify channel for Gay Out the City in season 1. It's an interview I really loved doing, so you might want to check that out. And with that, actually, I'll just say one more point. I would say this: Mateo and I are in the same state. I don't know what weather's like where he is, but it's raining here. So it's not like you're doing anything else. But as I said, I don't know. If there is an update to the story, I will say it on the podcast with Mateo if I ever have Mateo on. But in truth, I don't know. I don't know. I'm gonna close this out. This has been, well, actually no. I'm gonna close this out. But before I do my outro, I'm just going to say, if you did actually watch this episode, thank you. I appreciate it. It's not how I like to be, but shit happens. Anyway, with that being said, this has been Gay Out the City. I'm your host, Prince Electro Diamond, and I hope you've enjoyed.